There are moments that slice your life right down the middle. They don't happen under spotlights or with fanfare. They seep in like slow poison. A rupture so quiet you don't really feel it till hours later, when you're sitting heavy against the train seat and the world's melting past the window on your way back. My moment was a handshake. In the church aisle during my sister's wedding, a 30-year-old man reached out to shake my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, because for him, it was. A quick squeeze. 2 seconds, maybe less. His palm was warm. Not warmer than it should have been in the muggy heat of a summer Saturday in Minas Gerais. But my body didn't get the memo. My body reacted like someone had yanked a thread I'd spent 11 years tying into knots. Heat. Not the sun pouring through the church window. A heat that started in my chest and rose to my throat too fast. A dizzy moment, like standing up too quick and the world catching up a second later. Then the worst part, what actually took my breath. The terror that someone nearby might have seen it. That was the real panic. My face giving away the secret before I could shut down. 11 years of armor cracked by a simple handshake. Ever had that feeling? That your face reveals something you didn't sign up for? That your expression betrays you before you even know what you're feeling? I froze in the aisle for 2 solid seconds. Surrounded by people in fancy clothes, kids running around, perfume mixing with incense. 2 seconds staring at my own hand like it belonged to a stranger. Raphael moved on. He melted into the crowd, waving to people with this ease that seemed impossible to me. I stood frozen like a statue, watching almost 4,000 days of disguise crumble like paper. How can 2 seconds undo 11 years? How is that possible? This is the story I can't hold back anymore. It doesn't matter if it sounds optimistic or if everything ties up neat. Here's the thing, if you're still reading, whether it's 3 a.m., lunch break, or locked in the bathroom, there's a chance we carry the same invisible weight. That thing your throat won't name. I know. Stay with me till the end of this story, and you'll get it. The touch wasn't the problem. It was just the moment I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Let me tell you who I was before that Saturday. To understand what 2 seconds can do, you need to know what 11 years build. Lucas Andrade, 28, freelance graphic designer. I'd lived in São Paulo for 4 years in a 2-bedroom apartment, paying half the rent with money I made at home in my pajamas. Fixing layouts for clients I'd never met face to face. Work I loved. Freedom I chose. A life that worked. I had a girlfriend, Carla Ribeiro, 27, lawyer, dark hair, a smile that never wore out, the most confident person I'd ever met. We'd been living together for 2 years. She was the one who organized the closet, remembered my friends' birthdays, texted me asking if I'd eaten when I went silent for 3 hours. Carla loved me. I knew that. And I loved her too. The way you love someone who feels like peace, who feels like normal, who's a future you can show people and get approval for. That difference between actually loving someone and loving what they represent, that's the heart of everything I'm going to tell you. But back when I built this life, I didn't even let myself think about it. The family's proud. My mother, Vera Andrade, 56, tells everyone her son moved to São Paulo and made it. And I'm the son who made it. I call every Sunday, visit on Christmas, have a beautiful and smart girlfriend, got my own apartment and steady income. I'm the version of myself that's easy to love. This was the facade I'd spent over a decade building. The other version, the one I'd known existed since I was 17, stayed under the shirt, literally and figuratively. Literally. I had a thin necklace I wore tight around my neck, underneath everything, that no one had ever seen. Just mine. The only real thing. I was 17 when I first realized what I felt for a male classmate wasn't what I was supposed to feel. It happened normal, no big epiphany. Friday afternoon in the library, studying for chemistry, he brushed his arm against mine. Accident. I froze. That sudden tensing he didn't notice, but that marked my memory forever. I went home and stared at the ceiling for hours. Not drama, just a new, unwelcome clarity about something I didn't want to know. Like spotting a crack in white paint and realizing it had been there the whole time. You'd been seeing it, but not letting yourself think about it. That week, I decided it didn't exist. done. Sounds simple, but have you ever tried convincing your own body that something didn't happen? It's exhausting. It becomes your whole life, a 40-hour-a-week performance that pays nothing, but you keep it up because the alternative's unthinkable. The other path meant facing Dona Vera, seeing the disappointment on my mother's face, becoming family gossip, blowing up the ground under me before I'd even built a foundation. I chose silence, a choice I made every single morning for almost 12 years. I swore to my pillow that my true nature was a ghost, till the Friday when Carla held my hand in the car and I looked out the window dreading the weekend ahead. Not because it was dangerous, but this town is where I'm least myself, where the performance costs the most, where every person who's known me since childhood is another person I have to convince. Anna's wedding was that Saturday. I was going as Lucas Andrade, the proud son, Carla's boyfriend, the good brother. I was terrified I couldn't keep it up for 48 hours. The town smelled the same. That Minas Gerais countryside smell. Wet dust, hot asphalt, firewood burning. Couldn't replicate that on São Paulo's concrete. We turned onto the main street and got hit with it. Yanked me back to childhood. Made me dizzy. Carla thought it was beautiful. "What a charming town," she said, looking out the window. I smiled and agreed. The front of my mother's house was decorated. Banner, balloons, the door wide open like always when someone's coming. You could hear the music before we even parked. Sertanejo from a wedding playlist my aunt brought on her phone. Vera Andrade hugged me at the door. Strong, lingering, the kind only a mother can give. "My son," she whispered, and I closed my eyes. "I've missed you so much." She pulled back, looked me up and down. "I'm so proud of you. God gave me a son who turned out so well." I smiled. And said the pride was mine, that she raised me right, that everything was great. Autopilot. 11 years of practice. But even saying it, I felt that weight settle on my shoulders. Not anger at my mother. Never anger. It's more complicated. It's loving someone completely and knowing their love comes with conditions they don't even know are conditions. Vera Andrade loves me. She just loves the version I built for her. The house was packed. Aunts I hadn't seen in 2 years, cousins with new babies, childhood friends of Anna and Bruno I barely knew. Everyone asking the same questions. "Is São Paulo treating you well? How's work? When are you two getting married?" Always with a nod at Carla, who'd smile and say, "We've been dating forever, right, Lucas?" And I'd say, "Yeah, we have plans," and kill the subject. The house was a beautiful mess. Decorations stacked in the hallway, someone testing the wedding playlist in the living room, Aunt Marlene giving orders about table arrangements no one was actually following. That specific energy the night before something big. Everyone amped up, nervous, more affectionate than usual. I moved through it like always, functional, present enough, invisible when I needed to be. Anna found me in the hallway with a box of decorations, this energy of a happy bride mixed with sharp attention from someone who's been reading my face since childhood. She hugged me tight, then looked. Twice. That sisterly thing. Not worry exactly, not a question, just attention. Like she saw something she couldn't name but was filing away for later. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "I'm happy for you, Anna." And I was. I was completely happy for my sister. That feeling was real. She smiled and touched my arm before running off to handle some decoration emergency. And I kept carrying the box of decorations, thinking there was something too uncomfortably metaphorical about that. Later, stacking boxes in the living room, I heard one of Bruno's cousins tell the other, "Raphael's here, did you see? What a hottie for a best man." I pretended I didn't hear. The rehearsal was at 4 at the little church. I arrived with Anna's family. Carla wanted to rest, said the heat had wiped her out. I agreed too fast. The quiet in the car was a relief I didn't want to think about. The little church was typical small town. White walls, wooden pews with old varnish, plaster Christ above the altar with that serene look of someone who's seen it all. The priest, early 60s, clearly preferring Sunday Mass to rehearsals, was trying to organize the procession with tired authority. Rafael Moura came through the side door 10 minutes later. I recognized him before we were introduced. Not because we were friends, we weren't. But small towns have memories, and Rafael had been in mine since we were teenagers. 2 years older, different school, but he was one of those names everyone knew by sight. The ones who stand out, who are different, who the town notices. Rafael was the kid who didn't fit the mold. Not explicit actions or grand declarations, something veiled and crueler. The weight of other people's stares, whispers, the distance people kept. He didn't hide, never did. And that refusal to hide was, to that town, a provocation they didn't know how to handle. He left at 22. São Paulo. I found out the way small towns spread news. Did you know Rafael Moura went to São Paulo and is living the life he wanted? I followed him on social media for years without liking anything. Not cruelty, self-preservation. He came of age finding his tribe. In his youth, his visibility created turbulence. Just walking down the sidewalk caused discomfort. Now, 30 winters in, 8 years in São Paulo, his aura was different. No shields, no rehearsed anything. He radiated the lightness of someone who'd stopped asking permission to exist. I recognized that because I knew the alternative. He walked into the church like someone not apologizing for existing. Didn't sneer or act aggressive. Pure magnetism. A man who'd stopped shrugging his shoulders in daily life. Bruno hugged him like they hadn't seen each other in months, and they chatted with the ease of old friends. Then Bruno turned to us with introductions. Rafael Moura, my best friend since grade school. Rafael. This is Anna's family. Introductions in sequence. When it was my turn, Rafael held out his hand. Lucas Andrade, I said. I know who you are, he replied without affectation. We grew up in the same town. The handshake was brief, functional, weightless. He had already moved on to the next person, but I noticed. With precision, the way he took up space without apologizing, the way he talked without hedges. None of my kind of like that, none of does that make sense, just direct. Like someone who'd stopped rehearsing. Like he wasn't carrying anything that wasn't his. During rehearsal, the priest tried positioning the procession with instructions nobody was following, and Rafael, standing on my left waiting for our cue, made a low comment about the priest's expression. Something about how he'd crossed from patience into giving up without noticing when. I laughed. Instinctive. Before my brain could censor it. I covered my mouth and stared at the altar, pretending to care about the vicar's directions, and Rafael didn't say anything else, just a slight smile at the corner of his mouth, turning his attention back to the celebrant. That laugh disturbed me for 3 solid minutes. Not romantic attraction. I wouldn't even let myself think that word. A mental barrier. Sharp discomfort at being in a room with someone who embraced himself with a naturalness I denied myself. His mere existence felt like a question. Ever spent hours next to someone who makes you uncomfortable? Not bad uncomfortable, but something you can't name. Who makes you aware of your own body in a way that doesn't usually happen? Dinner was at the house afterward. The big table my mother saved for parties, stretched out with leaves, covered with linen that only came out for special occasions. The feast overflowed. Platters of chicken with okra, steaming rice with piki, cornbread, Aunt Marlene's inevitable cheese bread. Chatter formed a wall of sound, kids buzzing around under the table. The familiar scene that, without nostalgia, required swallowing your own anxieties. An armor-building skill I'd been perfecting since childhood. My mom was in her element, served everyone before sitting. This ritual she calls hospitality, but which was also control. A way to make the space work exactly how she needed. I watched her with that genuine love she has, and I thought, not for the first time, that the problem wasn't lack of love. It was that her love had a specific shape, and I'd been bending myself to fit it ever since I was a kid. Carla was at ease. That relieved and weighed on me. Relieved because she didn't need me to function socially. Weighed because it freed me to notice other things. She was telling my mother about a labor case she'd won, commanding the narrative with skill. Every detail perfect, impeccable rhythm, the promise that the best was coming. My mother laughed. Genuinely. Carla had that effect on people, put them at ease without any effort. One of the things I admired most about her. It was also one of the things that made everything harder to face. Raphael ended up on my left. Not by design, just random seating. We talked intermittently for 20 minutes, our conversation mixing with others. He asked where I worked. Freelance designer, São Paulo. He was an architect at a mid-sized firm, also São Paulo. 3 subway stops apart. We talked about the city, how it had changed and how it hadn't, how certain corners still smelled exactly like when we were 15. And then, in a moment of natural pause, Raphael said, "I always thought you were the kind of person who would need more space than this town had to offer." I didn't know what to make of that. Held his gaze, my brain spinning trying to translate the provocation between the lines. Raphael didn't look away, maintaining that enigmatic stillness from the church, ignoring the weight of what he'd just said. "Why did you think that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just an impression." Bruno's cousin said something loud. Conversation hijacked. Subject dead. But the sentence lingered. Circled my head through the rest of dinner. Through the flan. Through goodbyes. Raphael had seen something in me in that peripheral adolescence where I thought I was invisible. He'd noticed something Carla hadn't in 2 years, that Anna hadn't in a lifetime. Throughout dinner, I watched Raphael with the other guests. His fluidity was hypnotic. He didn't have that loud charisma that demands center stage. His influence flowed in quiet waters. Fielded questions without hedging, lent his ears without pre-made answers. His posture exuded ease, oblivious to the paranoia of someone trying to minimize their own space. I was constantly calculating it. 11 years of it. At that noisy table full of genuine affection, I realized something I didn't want to. Raphael wasn't happy in a way I needed to learn. He was just himself. And that, just being who you are without constantly managing how you look to others. I'd forgotten that was even possible. What exactly had he seen? Night came fast as it does in countryside summers. Suddenly dark, and the heat doesn't ease, just gets heavier. Sound of crickets instead of daytime noise. After the women headed for Anna's bachelorette party in the back bedroom, the men migrated to the porch. Bruno, Raphael, me, and 2 of the groom's cousins, Eduardo and Enrique, guys I barely knew, but who seemed like they couldn't handle silence, beer, marriage jokes, that men on the porch conversation on autopilot, soccer, work, São Paulo's expensive, is there hope for Brazil? Eduardo, the older cousin, had opinions on everything that only work if no one challenges them. Politics, real estate, why big city people don't get the countryside. Raphael agreed with what made sense, disagreed with what was wrong with that way of his. Not aggressive, but not pretending to agree when he didn't. I stayed on the sidelines, contributing just enough to seem present. Enrique asked if Carla and I were getting married soon. Called her a good girl. I agreed. Raphael shot a quick glance my way. Fleeting, unnoticed by the others. But it hit me. No criticism, just silent complicity, empathy for someone who recognizes rehearsed speeches. I averted my eyes to the beer in my hand. I participated. I smiled at the right times, nodded when appropriate, and dodged questions that went too deep. Can you imagine the toxic toll of a performance like that? The lie itself doesn't cost much. What sucks you dry is the radar on 24/7, the cold sweat of policing every facial twitch before it happens. Surviving 60 minutes of male banter is more exhausting than all-nighters fixing layouts. Around 11, Eduardo and Enrique headed to bed. Long day tomorrow. Bruno went to grab more beer from the kitchen. Took way too long. Dona Vera had cornered him about tomorrow's arrangements. Raphael and I were left alone on the porch. The silence that settled wasn't uncomfortable. That was the disconcerting part. Should have been uncomfortable. 2 guys who barely know each other. No mediator. Dark porch. Should have been an urge to fill it. But there wasn't. And the absence of that urge disturbed me more than any word ever could. Raphael stared out at the garden for a moment. Then, "You happy in São Paulo?" The question dropped like a stone in a lake. "I am," I said. Too fast. He didn't say anything. Silence came back. In that vacuum, 5 or 10 heavy seconds, I felt something new in years. He was waiting for the real answer, not the pre-packaged one. Authentic curiosity, not rushing to end the subject, There's a difference between someone who's moved on and someone who's waiting. I'd spent 11 years using the first kind. Say something. Move along before anyone asks more. Raphael's silence was different. The kind that doesn't push, but doesn't disappear. Just stays. And in the middle of that lingering silence, I realized I was holding my breath. I didn't know what to do with that. Before I could figure it out, heavy footsteps crossed behind us, and Bruno appeared looking like someone who'd survived a marathon. Guys, my mother-in-law's amazing, but she's got a talent for trapping you for 30 minutes talking about napkins. We laughed. The moment dissolved. But the question stayed with me as I got up to go to sleep, as I walked up the stairs, as I passed in front of the room where Carla was sleeping. You happy in São Paulo? The real answer. São Paulo is where I can breathe because nobody knows me well enough to notice I'm holding my breath. Saturday dawned. I woke up before everyone, stared at the ceiling with that feeling of too little sleep and too much thinking. A different weight on my chest. Not the familiar secret weight, but something that had shifted during the night without asking. The wedding day came with that specific energy of big events in small houses. Everyone moving around, the bathroom taken, coffee mixed with hairspray, the TV on in the front room broadcasting a morning show no one was watching, but that filled the silence. Carla was excited. Moss green dress that looked beautiful on her, and she knew it. Something nice about seeing someone who knows their worth that easily. I zipped her up, and she turned and kissed me with the ease of someone who can't imagine any other reality. It's going to be beautiful, she said. It is, I agreed. The ceremony was at 4. Till then, the house was organized chaos. Hair, makeup, nervous family, Bruno looking sleep-deprived. I helped where I could. Filled downtime with my phone pretending urgent work. Avoided being alone with my thoughts. It worked for a while. São Jose Church was bigger than the rehearsal church. Polished oak pews, white flowers, afternoon light pouring through side windows creating bands of golden dust. Almost full when we arrived. Anna had a lot of people who loved her, and that made me feel better. Outside the church, I bumped into Bruno in the hallway. Pale with nerves and handsomely happy, that groom energy of still not believing what's about to happen. Hey, stepdad, he called me like he always did. I'm way too nervous. It's gonna be fine, I told him, genuinely meaning it. Bruno's joy overflowed everything, dense, real. I patted his shoulder. When he turned away, I leaned against the wall watching him go, overcome by envy of that unrestrained authenticity, the bitter taste I couldn't name. I sat with Carla 4 rows back. She took my hand. I let her. When the music started and Anna walked down the aisle, something broke open in my chest. Organic impact. My stomach dropped. My breath caught. Instinctive reactions to witnessing real happiness from someone who means so much. Anna looked beautiful. Glowing with that radiance that has nothing to do with a dress or makeup and everything to do with being in the right place, doing the right thing, next to the right person. My mother cried, her shoulders shaking, tissue in her hand. I felt my own eyes burn. The contrast was cruel. Up there, my sister was living complete authenticity, and I was 4 rows back holding the wrong hand. Didn't think it that rawly, but something like that existed for a second, and I pushed it down with practiced ease. The ceremony was beautiful, and I watched it from behind glass. The priest spoke about love and commitment. Words reached me like I was underwater. Bruno said his vows with a breaking voice. Anna smiled through tears, rings exchanged. People applauded. I squeezed Carla's hand, and for the first time clearly, I asked myself how much longer I could do this. Then the music played again, and the procession left. Carla let go of my hand to grab her purse. I got up with the flow of people, everyone moving toward the center aisle. The heat of so many bodies in the nave was thick. Walking in the flow, the main aisle appeared. Same aisle the family was leaving through. That's when I saw Raphael. He was 6 feet ahead, navy suit, greeting guests with that unmistakable posture. Organic, attentive, stripped of pretense. Hugs for people he knew, handshakes for the rest. That presence that doesn't apologize for existing. Our eyes met. He smiled, reached out his hand. I reached out mine. The palm of his hand was warm. And then it happened. The touch lasted a second, no fanfare. To the ants around us, just another greeting, a handshake like 1,000 others. But the temperature of Raphael's hand against mine hit before my thoughts. And my body. This body I'd spent 11 years teaching not to react, not to notice, not to feel things. My body reacted. Heavy heat. That sudden fever from the altar yesterday, amplified and fast. My pulse hammered at my neck. A purely biological epiphany, free from logic. My nerves got the message my brain kept censoring. "Hey, how's it going?" Raphael said. "Good," I said. And he had already moved on. He was already 2 steps ahead, greeting someone else, completely absorbed in the normal flow of life. I froze. My lungs stopped working. Time froze in that crowded aisle, staring at my own fingers, stunned. Life went on. A child ran past. A woman in a lilac dress asked me to move. Conversations, music, the joyful chaos after the ceremony. All of it kept going without pausing, because the world doesn't pause for the moment when you can't lie to yourself anymore. The world went on. I was the one who stopped. No one noticed. Or at least, I don't think they did. The reception was in the central square. Round tables under white tents, live music, the kind of buffet that tries to please everyone and actually does. Guests arrived in groups, conversations multiplying, the heat easing as evening fell. I operated on autopilot. Here's what that looks like. I smiled for photos. I have one with Anna and Bruno, where my smile's so perfect I believed it for a second. Danced with Carla when the music was good. Ate something. Talked to uncles I hadn't seen in 2 years about rent and neighborhood changes. Aunt Marlene pulled me aside to chat about São Paulo, with that genuine, slightly invasive interest relatives get to exercise. Asked when I'd proposed to Carla. Said she seemed like a serious girl. Asked if I was happy. Said I looked more settled than last time. I answered everything right. Said we were thinking about marriage. That Carla was great. That I was happy. That São Paulo was hard, but where I wanted to be. Every sentence executed perfectly. Every sentence a little betrayal that didn't even hurt anymore. Internally, war. The normal rationalizations. My trained file for when things slipped. It was hot, stressed by the environment. Just a handshake. Bodies react to everything. Doesn't mean anything. I'm tired. Too much sensory input. Anyone would have felt the heat. Too hot in church. Each rationalization lasted less than the one before. Glass of water in my hand, squeezing it harder than needed. 4 hours earlier at rehearsal, they'd have lasted all night. Now they dissolved before forming, like trying to build with wet sand. Something was different. It wasn't the first time my body reacted to something I didn't allow. It was the first time I couldn't convince myself it hadn't happened. The church aisle was proof of my system failure. I'd frozen staring at my own knuckles. That tiny fraction of time bypassed any excuse. A offered palm and direct eye contact knocked out my defenses. Around 10, Carla came over while I was hiding in a corner with water. She rested her hand on my arm gently. "You okay?" "You're quiet." "Just tired," I said. Lot for one day. The lawyer narrowed her eyes. The directness in her pupils almost broke me, but she smiled reassuringly. "Makes sense. We'll leave earlier tomorrow." And she accepted it. She accepted a small lie so easily that something broke inside me. Not anger at her. Sadness. The specific sadness of realizing your lie's collateral damage. Carla wasn't naive. She just loved and trusted me. And that trust made the lie impossible to keep. And at the same time, so easy. She deserved a Lucas who didn't have to lie. As the reception wound down and older guests left, I excused myself and went to a nearby restaurant's restroom. Closed the door, let the tap run, leaned over the sink. Looked in the mirror. 11 years of looking into mirrors every morning. I'd learned exactly what expression to make, what angle, how to look normal to someone pretending to check if they were normal. But that night, the reflection was just my face. Unfiltered. No performance. Just a 28-year-old man exhausted in a way that doesn't show on any medical test. I couldn't even hold my own gaze. The reception broke up. Families with kids first, then the elderly, younger crowd last. Carla went to bed early like she said, with a headache from the heat and wine. I said I'd stay longer to say hi to a cousin I'd missed. A lie, but she left. Sat for another 20 minutes at a table being dismantled, chatting with whoever passed, smiling when needed. Till staying served no purpose. Slipped out the side. My mother's house was a 6-minute walk from the square. I knew this path by heart, walked it 1,000 times, night and day, summer rain and July cold. Walked slowly. The heat had eased to tolerable, and the streets were empty in that small-town way where the place feels yours when no one else is around. I came in through the back door, went straight to the yard. My mother's backyard was a patch of dirt with a mango tree on the left, a vegetable garden she fought to keep alive, an old iron seesaw from childhood. We spent hours there as kids, made up stories. Anna created characters, and I drew on paper she stole from school. It was also where I spent summer nights at 17, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. I stepped out and froze. Raphael was there, leaning against the mango tree, looking up at the sky with a cigarette barely burning, holding it more than smoking it. The glowing ember in the dark was the only light besides the kitchen window. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Not planned. Clear immediately, in the surprise on his face when he saw me, in how I stopped before fully stepping out. Two guys who ended up in the same place without coordinating it. "I didn't know you were here," I said. "I didn't know you were coming," he replied. Silence. I froze at the threshold. Shoe sole dug into the wooden sill. Till accumulated exhaustion, or blind surrender of a cornered guy, dragged me onto the damp earth anyway. I sat on the edge of the garden. Raphael stayed where he was. For a few minutes, we sat in silence without it feeling awkward. The town was quiet in that specific way countryside towns get at 11 on a Saturday night. Far away, the echo of the reception's music. Up close, just crickets. "This yard seems like where people come when they can't be where they're supposed to be," Raphael said, just thinking out loud. "Why are you here?" I asked. "I just am." More silence. Then, without rushing, without pressure, without the kind of intent I'd learned to detect and defend against, Raphael took one last drag, tossed the butt, and said, "You don't have to tell me anything." I looked at him. "But if you want to, I've been exactly where you are, and I survived." The words echoed through the yard with bluntness that forced me to close my eyes. His sentence exposed his past, not my present. But it became the clearest portrait anyone had ever painted of my own soul. The silence that followed swallowed everything. A minute, maybe less. Its strength was in its magnetic density. Tons of omissions piled in air that was now impossible to breathe. I looked at the soft dirt beneath my shoes, stared at the calluses on my palms, looked at the mango tree's leaves, looked at nothing, useless hope of hiding my face. And then I did the one thing I hadn't done in 11 years. I told the truth to another human being. No exact definitions, no ready-made labels, no speeches I'd rehearsed and torn up 100 times. Just the essential. The exposed core of pain, the brutal wear of carrying that alone. I said I was exhausted. That pretending had been easier than the alternative, and I didn't know where the limit was anymore. That I'd spent the day feeling like something was breaking inside me without being able to name it. That I was afraid, not of what I was, but of everything that came after. My mother, Carla. What people would think. The look on Dona Vera's face when she understood. My voice was raspy, low whisper, eyes dry, sparing the moment any theatrics, like collapsing into an armchair after walking for miles, tense muscles yielding to gravity with a sharp ache. Raphael listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Do you know what the hardest thing to carry is?" I shook my head. "It's not the secret. You can carry a secret. What destroys you is when you start doubting whether the truth still exists inside you. If you hid it so much that what you were hiding disappeared." I looked at him. "The truth still exists," he said. The fact that you're in this garden at 11 o'clock at your sister's wedding instead of sleeping. That's the truth existing. No false comfort or optimistic predictions. No savior counselor role, no cheap optimism. The most honest anyone had been with me in 11 years. We stayed in the garden for another 20 minutes without saying much. Sometimes silence is the only language, and we both knew that. When I got up to leave, Raphael gave a subtle nod, a silent code that said, "You can go," and guaranteed our secret was safe there. I walked in through the back door without looking back. The bedroom was the same childhood bedroom, same single bed with the mattress my mother replaced, but with the same characteristic tilt, same window where I could see the garden, same drawer where I kept paper secrets that didn't exist anymore. Carla was sleeping on the left side of the bed with the total stillness of someone with nothing weighing on them. Steady breathing, relaxed face, hair spread across the pillow. Genuinely beautiful, and I genuinely liked her. And those two facts coexisted with everything else I knew about us in an equation I had no way to solve. I lay down without waking her, stared at the ceiling, didn't sleep. But not from anxiety or looping thoughts, just motor inability to pass out. My system hovered on an unprecedented threshold, not peace, but ripped off the autopilot that had guided me. Like after a fever breaks. Not entirely well yet, but the worst is over. I thought about the garden. About the glowing ember of Raphael's cigarette. About the way he said, "You don't need to say anything." And how those 6 words did something no pressure or question ever had. Gave me permission to choose. I replayed my last decade. Avoided abstractions, dove into tangible details. Remembered the rainy afternoon in the library, the smell of aging paper, the warmth of that classmate's arm. Reconstructed the meticulous trail of choices that suffocated how I felt, burying essence under thick layers of pretense. The apartment in Sao Paulo. I chose partly because it was far enough so no one would know me as the Lucas from before. The first time out with Carla and thinking maybe this could work, maybe it could be enough. Not with bitterness, with new clarity. Like when your eyes adjust to dark and suddenly you see the outline of things that were always there. Around 1 in the morning, I picked up my phone and opened Raphael's Instagram. Not for any specific reason. Didn't look at photos searching for meaning. Just confirmed the person existed. That the garden conversation had happened. That there was someone in Sao Paulo, 3 subway stops away, who'd already survived this. I closed the phone. Thought about Carla. About what would need to be done that I couldn't do today, not tonight, not in this city. Not with my mother waking up tomorrow 2 rooms upstairs to serve coffee. The timing of certain truths is a responsibility you carry with the truth. I knew there were things I'd do that would hurt. I knew there was no way around it. Carla asleep beside me was the most honest image of what I'd built and the cost. She was real. The affection I had for her truly existed. What was missing was the fire of true romance that any partner demands, leaving only the brotherly gratitude of someone who'd shared a roof with an extraordinary woman for almost 800 days. Doing what needed to be done would hurt her, and hurting her would hurt me too. But different. The way of someone who causes damage that could have been avoided had they been braver sooner. The true cost of the delay. Not exhaustion from pretending. Real people who stayed inside the lies when they finally fell apart. But there was something I didn't expect. The fear of the moment wasn't the moment. I'd spent 11 years dreading an instant that, when it came, was a dark garden and a simple sentence and 30 seconds of silence, and I was still in one piece. Stared at the ceiling for a while longer, then closed my eyes, not to sleep, to rest in that new state of someone who's stopped pretending they don't know what they know. Sunday came with fine drizzle that, in Minas, turns dirt roads to red mud and the garden smell to something washed clean. Breakfast was in the big living room with everyone. Anna and Bruno had spent the night at a nearby hotel, showed up at 10 looking like a couple who hadn't slept and didn't care. Cheese bread, couscous, strong coffee, Aunt Marlene telling stories. My mother served everyone before sitting down. Ate normally, chatted normally, smiled at the right times. But there was something different, invisible to everyone. Not a different Lucas on the outside, a different density on the inside, something only I knew existed. Hadn't performed at breakfast like I always did. I was just there. At 3, my mother called me to help fold tablecloths. We stayed in the dining room for 10 minutes, folding linen in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've known each other for a long time. "You okay?" she asked, still folding. "Yeah," I said. She nodded with typical maternal resignation, unsatisfied with the barrier, willing to respect my silence. After a moment, "That city's been good for you, São Paulo. I know you chose to stay far away, but it's done you good." I looked at her. "You seem less guarded," she said. "I can't explain it, but you seem less guarded than last time." Didn't answer, kept folding, but I thought, she doesn't know what she saw. But she saw something. I still didn't know how to give that to her. But for the first time in 11 years, I wasn't afraid that one day I would have to. Goodbyes started around 4. The family scattering, cars leaving one by one, lingering hugs of people who don't know when they'll see each other again. Rafael had left before lunch, Bruno told me when I asked. Early bus, appointment early Monday in São Paulo. There was no goodbye between the two of us. There was no need. Finally, my mother. She hugged me at the door with the same strong hug as always, and this time I hugged her back different. Not a son needing to earn her love, but one who knows her love is real, even if incomplete. That there'll be a day, I don't know when, not now, when I'll need to tell her the truth too. And that her love has a better chance than I'd always feared. "Visit more often," she said. "I'll try," I said. And it was true both ways, the way she understood it and the way I knew it. The train left at 6:40 p.m. Carla passed out before we crossed the city limits. Gentle breathing of someone surrendering to exhaustion with a clear conscience, her temple against the window pane. I was far from closing my eyes. Kept looking out the window. Minas countryside rolling by, green mixed with red dirt, back roads cutting through vegetation, small towns appearing and disappearing too fast to register. Sky darkening on the horizon as the train moved forward. My head was empty of strategies. I'm making a point of this lack of compass. The audience always wants neat plots, magical resolutions, leaps of courage that stop the bleeding. No trace of bravery in me. The consequences formed a massive wall, and I didn't have the slightest idea how I'd climb the first rock. A conversation with Carla that I needed to have and didn't know how. A mother I loved who still didn't know who I was. An apartment in São Paulo I was returning to without knowing what I'd do differently once I got there. The train passed through cities I didn't know and probably never would. Little places that appear for 30 seconds then vanish. I thought that each of these places had people carrying things like what I was carrying. That the exhaustion of not being who you are wasn't geographical or specific to me. It was a human condition we rarely name because naming it would make everything far too real. Rafael had named it. Not my name. He'd named the condition, the exhaustion, the specific moment of doubting if truth still existed. And that had been enough for me to finally hear what I already knew. But there was something that hadn't existed for 11 years. I knew who I was, not a small thing. For a long time, I thought I didn't even have that I'd buried it so deep, for so long. That truth had simply ceased to exist inside me. That the thread had tangled so much there was no thread left, only the knot. The garden told me otherwise. The fact that I was in that garden at 11 at night, unable to sleep, unable to fake comfort where there was none. That was truth existing. Stubborn and inconvenient and completely alive. A touch. 2 seconds. A warm hand in a church aisle on a summer Saturday. It's so little to destroy 11 years of construction. And at the same time, it's exactly the right amount. Because what that touch destroyed wasn't me. It was the shell I'd built around myself so I could exist without seeing myself. And without the shell, with all the mess and fear and consequences still to come, I was still there. Still me. I placed my hand on my chest, right where the thin necklace sat tucked under my shirt. That was enough for a Sunday night. For now, enough.